Hi everybody, I'm Teresa. I am the owner of Decoupage Queen and I am putting together this demo for you today. This is a step-by-step on how to create your own junk journal. What I did was I cut some mat board and I used a 12 by 16 sheet of mat board and I cut it in half, and then I took half of it and then I cut the three pieces that you see on my screen right now. It's approximately an 8 by 5 3/4 journal. And so the way that I did this is I am lining up two big pieces for the outside of the book, and then the spine piece, which is 1.5 inches. And you use tyvek tape in order to secure all the pieces together. And you can see the way I'm doing it. I'm just kind of taking it and wrapping it around from top to back. And that basically creates like an indestructible taped hinge for your book. Tyvek tape is a commercial tape that they use in the construction industry. And see how when I fold it, it just makes a nice, smooth fold. So you can make any size that you want to. You don't have to follow my measurements, but I will list my measurements in the comments or in the description actually, so you can, if you want to make this exact same project, you can follow along and make it. Next, what I'm doing is I'm going to be decoupaging the outside of my journal with a cover, and I'm just using plain white craft paper. There's nothing unique or special about this paper. You could use any paper. I chose white because I'm going to be decoupaging. When you're decoupaging with regular paper like copy paper or bond paper, it's a good idea to get both sides of the paper just a little bit damp with water, so that it softens the fibers a little bit, so that it will go on less wrinkly. When it dries, those fibers will tighten back up, and so it will create a more smooth decoupaged surface. You don't have to wet rice paper, but any really other paper, not tissue paper, but any other regular weight copy type paper, it's a good idea to just dampen a little bit. You don't need to soak it. So I'm laying that down, and I want to show you, I'm kind of gluing it like that, right? And so you could take a brayer, or you could take, I'm just using my hands here. You could take a squeegee or whatever surface that you wanted, and just make sure to kind of gently push out all the air bubbles, so that you don't get any wrinkles, and make sure the whole thing is adhered. So I have a layer of glue on the bottom, and I'm putting a layer of glue on the top. I'm just using the Pentart decoupage glue in matte here. That is my preferred decoupage glue. And I'm going to cover the entire surface, and then I'm going to let that dry. So I did choose white because I am going to also be decoupaging this with rice paper. And so I wanted it to be completely white, and I also needed to do this so that I cover up that tyvek. See all that, the words tyvek. I don't want that to show through when I decoupage my rice paper. So when you're drying this, see how it's starting to curl up at the ends a little bit. The boards, the mat boards, because this isn't book board, it's really just very thick cardboard. It will have a tendency to warp a little bit, and I'm going to show you how to straighten that out. So you're just going to spritz the other side with water in order to flatten it back out, and that's all you have to do. So now I'm going to seal up my corners, and I'm spraying a little bit of water again to soften it. And I'm just putting the decoupage glue right on my corners, and I'm making a nice square fold. And then I'm going to do each corner that same way, without pressing it. I want that I want each corner to still be pretty sharp. So I'm going right up to the edge of each corner and then mashing the paper down all the way around each of those corners, to seal that down. And then we will now take the glue and we will go ahead and wrap the paper all the way around the book on all four sides using that same decoupage technique. And again, I did spritz a little bit of water on the paper in order to get it nice and tight there. Now the other side, what you don't see, the other side is now completely dry. So you want to make sure that the first step is completely dry before you attempt this, because otherwise you risk messing up your work on the other side. And so what you're seeing right here, this will end up being the inside of my book. And I will end up taking another sheet of paper to cover up these seams, and then also to cover up that tyvek tape. So this is just kind of like a different approach to bookmaking. Very similar to what real bookmakers do, except most of the time they're using book cloth instead of paper, and they're using book board instead of mat board, and they're using binding tape instead of tyvek tape. But it's all the same idea, and we're just adapting it for our purposes. So here again, I'm just taking another sheet of craft paper. You can use copy paper. It doesn't have to be any particular type. And I'm just cutting it. I'm not going to go edge to edge. I'm just kind of cutting it to just cover the seams, okay? And then to give it a nice polished look. If you look on the inside of any book, you will see there is usually some sort of lining on the inside. And that's the same concept that we're applying here. And again, we're using our decoupage glue to cover the surface completely, and to put this sheet of lining paper down to create and it's also creating a little bit more sturdiness to the book itself, because the mat board is not as thick as book board. And so we're creating a couple of little extra layers in order to make it a nice sturdy book jacket. So we would let that dry completely, no paint needed, and I'm taking my bone folder and I'm going to just push it through those seams, and now you can see I have a beautiful white book jacket that you can now proceed to decorate. So I will be using the Andy Skinner number jumbo paper. This is a brand new paper from the Decoupage Queen collaboration with Andy Skinner for 2023. And I chose this paper because I thought it was just gorgeous. It already had, along the side, it kind of already looked very suited to a book. So you can see there's a little bit of separation between both sides with the spine, and it sort of reminded me of a book anyway. So I'm using that same decoupage medium, and I'm going to go ahead and apply my rice paper to the outside of the book, and this will end up being the book cover. And so again, I'm just using, the way that I do it is I lay it on first. I lay the paper on first, and then I sort of just do a section of glue at a time. And that keeps me from having to keep picking it up and putting it back down, because I know that I'm starting in the position that I want it to be in. And now I'm going to cover the whole thing completely with decoupage glue, and then I will let that dry. And so you could choose any paper for this purpose. You could choose any paper that you wanted to. And even if you didn't want to use rice paper, you could certainly use your own paper. I would just recommend, if you use a different weight paper, to dampen both sides of it with a little mist of water. And now that is drying. And what I have decided to do here is I'm going to be doing a little bit of blending along the sides with some acrylic paint colors. Because my paper wasn't quite long enough, as you can see. So I just decided that I would go ahead and blend out both sides with some acrylic colors. And so you can see, I used, I think there's vintage beige in there, a little bit of natural tones, a couple of browns, in order to blend that out. And so most of this will end up getting camouflaged with the step that I do next, which will just have to be a surprise. So when I blend, I usually do kind of a dabbing. It's not really brushing the paint on, it's more dabbing the paint. And then you can see that I start to even go into the paper, so that if I don't have the exact color, it's okay, because the paint color that I mixed up, I'm now dabbing into the paper, so it kind of becomes the right color by default. And so it does do a nice job of tying it all together. Now, I didn't necessarily have to do this step because I did use an awful lot of the next product that I'll show you, but I did want to at least to give it a night, just in case it shows through, just to make sure that I didn't have anything unexpected happening, because I really don't want a whole lot of white showing through when we get to this point. Now, the next thing we'll do is we are going to take a product called Decor Glue Tacky, and I am going to put that on my book randomly in various places. Now, my paint is mostly dry here, so I don't need to be concerned about messing up my paint job. But we are going to be doing some gold leafing. This is a product that is relatively new to the PentArt line, and I really do think that it is the best. It is really the best product that I have ever used for gold leafing. It is extremely tacky. It dries completely clear, and it doesn't leave it basically wherever you put it, and then you apply the gold leafing, it will adhere, and it will keep a nice crisp edge. And so I'm just being a little bit strategic about where I apply it. I'm not putting it everywhere, and I'm not trying to go overboard. I just am kind of dotting it on with a paintbrush, very, very randomly, because I just want a beautiful pop of gold color along this book. I really do think that it lends itself quite nicely to a gilding technique. Then you let that dry, and once it's completely dry, it will remain tacky. And so now I'm going to take my gold leafing flakes. This is actually gold and silver, which I thought would be so pretty on this book. And you just take a soft brush, and you can apply the flakes all over the surface, and it will only stick where you have the tacky glue. And so I've just got a nice soft brush. I'm laying the flakes down and I'm dabbing it around and I have some excess as well on my brush that I'm moving across the book. So I put some in those red numbers. I put a lot of it along the edges, and then up at the tops. So it's quite random, but it's not. I don't think it's overkill. I think it turned out quite nicely. And you do have to be careful when you're using these flakes not to breathe too hard. They do have a tendency to blow away. And then you can take a sheet of paper and collect your leftover bits onto that sheet of paper and then just put them back in your jar. And so it just takes a nice soft brush. You can go back over it in order to smooth it down, and look at how beautiful, just what a beautiful result that is with the gold and silver. These are Pentart flakes. They come in, oh gosh, probably 12 different colors. There's like a steampunk color, there's a copper color, many different varieties of colors mixed together. But I just thought this one would be so pretty with the gold and the silver. And so I'm brushing away all of the extra, and then I can save it for another project. But it just stays on there so nicely. And again, I think that tacky glue is really the secret to getting a beautiful result. Now, I'm not going to seal this. And if I did seal this, I would need to use a solvent-based varnish because this has metal in it. So if I sealed it with a water-based product, the metal leafing would start to tarnish right away. It would start to oxidize, and you would actually see it become a lot less vibrant. Now we'll take the Japanese postcard paper, and we are going to decoupage this using just the same decoupage technique that we always use with our Pentart decoupage glue and matte. And we're going to switch over to background music while this is going on. So just kick back and relax. So when we assembled our book, one other little piece that we had was another piece of board that's a 1.5 inch spine. And this is what we're going to actually be gluing or sewing, rather, the pages of our book into. And then we take this whole spine with the glued pages and we glue that down into the book. So it needs to be just a hair smaller width-wise than the width of your book. So in other words, it's 1.5 inches, but I actually trimmed it maybe 1/8 or 1/16 even of an inch so that it would fit down in the middle of my book perfectly without curling up on the sides. It needs to be able to really just seat down in there perfectly. And so I'm going to go ahead and decoupage that spine as well to make it look nice and attractive. So what I'm showing you right now are book jackets or signature covers that I've also used a variety of scrapbook paper in conjunction with rice papers and gone ahead and created 5 little covers that will kind of be little miniature booklets. And I've got 5 of them, so I'm going to take 7 pages each of paper that's cut to size to fit the entire book. And you can see there along the side I did what was called a bone folder in order to really get those creases nice and tight. And so I'm just using a variety of different colored papers in order to just add some variety and interest. And I will fold those in half and then I'll put them inside each signature cover. And so a lot of people, when they make junk journals, they do this. They'll do this last, and then they will assemble the book all at one time. But I am going to assemble my book basically as a blank journal with only the signature pages decorated. Because I really like the process of creating journals much more than I like the process of creating the pages inside the journals. And so I'm just going through and assembling each one. We will switch over to background music again until these are all assembled, and then I will show you how to sew these into the spine. Once those are all put together, we are going to create with a Sharpie. We're going to create a template for us to punch some holes into. And basically what we need is we need 3 different sets of holes, and we need 5 across. So we need 3 sets going down with 5 across, and the ones across will represent a spot for each signature to get sewn into. And so it's just kind of random. I'm not measuring. And once you've got those holes in place or the marks in place, Then you're going to line up your spine along the edge of your booklets so that you know where to punch the holes into your booklets as well. I'm using a crocodile and I have it set to the smallest setting, which is, I will have to confirm the measurements in just a moment, but it is the smallest one. There's one that's 3/8. That's not the one. I think it's 1/16. It's a very small hole that you need. You don't want to use the larger one because we're using a needle and thread. And so you're punching out all of those holes, and now you're going to do the same where you made your marks on each signature. And this crocodile is an awesome tool because it's going to go through all of those pages. I did use 7 pages in each one of these little booklets. I didn't want my journal to be too thick because I did have 5 signatures. So I used a few less pages than I normally would inside each of the signatures. And so I'm just taking where I put my Sharpie along the edge and I'm punching those little holes. There should be 3 in each signature. And periodically I'm just making sure that they're still lining up. Sometimes it can be hard to find the hole. And so I'm just double checking against my spine to make sure that they're lining up properly. And so you have to do this a total of 5 times, or at least the number of signatures that you end up creating. And now we're ready to sew these onto our spine. We're going to use a needle that has a wide eye, and we're going to be using waxed linen thread. A really good brand for both of these is Line Co. They do sell a lot of bookmaking materials. I'm not quite sure what I'm using here, but in the future, those are the products that I will be using as Line Co. brand for bookmaking. And so I actually started off wrong here, but I quickly corrected myself. And the way that you do it is we're going to put a hole through the middle. So we're leaving a tail, and then we're coming along the top, back side, and then we're going down through the bottom on the inside. And that's how your spine should look. Let's do this again. We're going to measure 3 lengths of waxed linen thread. We're going to thread our needle. We're taking that and we're going through the middle, but leaving a tail. Then we're coming now through the back and up at the top, now through the bottom. So you have one long string in the middle, and then through the middle again. You're going to take your string on either side of that middle thread and tie it 2 to 3 times so it's nice and tight. So I like to work, as far as my columns go, I like to work from the back and then going up to the front. So we now have 2 of 5 done, and we're working on the 3rd column of holes. Here I'm just trimming a little bit of excess. It was a little bit too sticking out too much, so I'm trimming it just a little bit, and I'm measuring 3 lengths of thread. I'm cutting that and threading my needle. I'm going to take this, I'm going to go through the middle, through the 3rd set of holes, leaving about a 3 to 4 inch tail, then coming up through the top. You might have to pause and watch it a few times. Then I'm going back down to the bottom, and then now coming back through the middle. And I'm going to take the string on either side and double knot it. And make sure that's pressed down nice and flat. And we are actually going to repeat that a couple more times, And I'll switch over to background music while we're doing that. Okay, and now it is time to get our express glue, and we're going to glue that spine right down into that book. And I've got it covered nice and thick, and I do want to put that perfectly placed right in the middle so that both sides can come up without struggling. And I'm going to take my bone folder and press down in there to make sure it's nice and firm against the surface. And we're going to let that dry overnight. And here we are the next day. We are coming back and it's dry. And we're just going to put the finishing touches right on our book. I'm measuring the length of it because now I'm going to put some ties along the side with my crocodile tool, and I'm going to be using a little hole punch and an eyelet, and here this is where I want the bigger hole, so I do want the 3/8 hole here, and so I just made sure that I measured the same distance from the top on both sides, on the top and the back. And I'm just creating some little holes that I can feed some ribbon through so that I will have a beautiful closure that I can tie to keep my book shut. So these are little eyelets, and this tool will actually fasten those eyelets as well. There's another setting on there that is really cool, and you can see how neat that looks. It just gives it a nice professional look, and I did that on a lot of the tags too inside the journal. It just makes it look so pretty and so finished. And now I'm just taking a little bit of ribbon. I'm going to feed that through on the front and on the back, and then we'll be able to tie this shut and give it a beautiful finishing touch. So here you can see it's all done. Voila, we created our journal. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.